Good morning. I ain't looking at y'all because I ain't got my cool on yet. So I'm trying, man. I'm trying to represent. See if this is gonna stay up. All right. Officially, good morning. There we go. Um, Slides up good. I was thinking about the teaching today, and I wish I could tell you that I didn't stay up till 2 o'clock in the morning, Randy, but that would be a lie. And I got started on this early. Only this time I was up. God was talking to me. It was sweet. I was like, yup, got that. It was good. So let's start. We're going to be doing this series called The God We Never Knew, looking at the passage out of 1 Corinthians. Me and Mike, again, I tell you, we had this brain thrust about, wouldn't it be cool to teach this passage descriptively, instead of prescriptively. And I said last time, I get scared when I hear this passage used for couples in marriages, because it's an impossible passage to live up to. And there's only one person in the creation that can do what he describes, what Paul describes as love, and that's the Father. And interesting enough, when you look at Jesus and the picture of Jesus, when he came to represent his Father. He didn't come to represent himself. He didn't come on his agenda. He came on the Father's agenda and came to give us a very accurate reflection of what the Father's love looks like. So let's take a look at that. I found this picture. You know me, I'm always on the internet trying to find things, and I was thinking about this passage, and I decided to go back in time. Can y'all see that picture? I decided to go back in time to one of the old songs. Now, some of you, I'm dating myself, because some of you don't even know who DC Talk is. You know who Toby McKeon is, though, right? Toby Mac. Well, he used to be in an old group called DC Talk. And they had an old album called God is Doing a New Thing. And what I was thinking about is, what Paul's trying to describe is that the Father's doing a new thing in the person and life of Christ. And it has an impact on our life. Let me read you some of Toby Mac's lines. Now, I'm not a rapper. I love hip hop, but I'm a poet. I'm not a rapper. So I'm going to read this poetically instead of trying to bring it like Toby did. Here's what he says. God is doing a brand new thing. But since time began, he remains the same. Faithful forever to his word. Solid. A cornerstone unstirred. But look down through the ages and you will find God doesn't change, but he knows the time. From harp to piano and song to rap, you know God's with us, so we cannot lack. And the chorus says this: God is doing a new thing in our lives. We're doing a new thing through Jesus Christ. God is doing a new thing through our music. We're doing a new thing so he can use it. Now you're saying, Jay, well, now you just tried to squeeze that in. You just tried to squeeze some hip hop in, didn't you? No. Here's my idea. Paul is talking about God the Father to the Corinthians who have history connected to the old covenant God. So the God he's about to describe is going to blow their socks away. When he starts out with the notion that God is patient and God is kind, there are people in history who know the Jewish history. And they're elbowing each other and saying, nah, man, that ain't the God I heard about. That ain't the love y'all showed us 1,000 years ago. And so God is doing a new thing. And what he does, first of all, is say that his love in the person of Christ is patient. And the word for patient is long-suffering. And his word, second word for love, for the Father, Paul describes as kind. And I want you to think of compassion and consideration attuned to us. God is attuned to us. Now, I was thinking about this. Why would Paul have to do this? Why would he have to describe a new thing? Why would he have to tell the Corinthians about this new kind of love? And my idea is this, that his attempt was he wanted to remove the stench from love, from a bad love gone, from love gone bad. We write songs that say, what's love got to do with it? But we see in video and in TV and in real life, people doing violent things in the name of love. People doing possessive things in the name of love. People being arrogant about and treating their love and partner arrogantly as if they were property in the name of love. We see people coveting other people's goods in the name of love. We not see it just outside the church. We see it inside the church, Randy. We see pastors preaching covet in the name of love, representing the Father. No. Paul says I have to describe a different thing. He wants to put words in the Corinthians' mind that wipe out the stench of bad love. Wipe out the stench of a bad reflection or a bad taste of love in your mouth. Now, I got a question for you. How many of you guys love coffee? Raise your hand high. If you're a coffee addict, proudly proclaim that right now. Okay, coffee addicts. I found out something about coffee. Did you know, Joe, that coffee can heal or prevent a migraine? Did you know that? How many knew that? Okay. Coffee, I didn't know that. I don't love coffee, though, so I would know that. I would know the medicinal benefits of coffee because I don't like coffee. But I'm very allergenic. And in my office, people come in all the time, and they come in wearing their pretty scents. You know, the ladies come in all perfumed up, and the men come in all cologne, machoed out. And as soon as they come and sit in my office, in about 2.5 minutes, my head starts going boo, boo, boo. And if I don't catch it quick enough, I'm asking Gina to cancel my day. I'm out. And I'm laying in the bed, curled up in the ball with the lights off, not moving, until I can go to sleep. But I found a trick. If you go look on my desk, right above, on the first shelf of my desk is a zippy bag. And in the zippy bag, I put freshly ground coffee, right? And what happens is, you know, the lady like Nancy comes in my office wearing her stuff, and she didn't read the signs, which we have red signs all over the building. They say, please don't wear perfume. And she comes like, hey, we're going to talk about something. And my head's going, oh. And I say, just a second, Nancy, I got to do something. I open up my Ziploc bag and sniff the coffee. She said, what you doing? I'm saying, you are messing with me today. I sniffed the coffee. And what I found out is if you sniff the coffee early, the people in Dayton's and Macy's and all, Yonkers, they know this. That's where I learned it from, is the lady. I said, how do you get people, when you put perfume on and you want them to try another perfume, how do you get the smell of the old perfume to go away? She said, just use coffee. I said, coffee? I said, I wonder if that can take the smell out so I don't get a migraine, Randy. She said, yeah. So I got a Ziploc full like this, and I change it over. I don't like coffee, y'all, but it saves my head. Now, here's my point. Here's my point. Like coffee, or should I say better than coffee, Jesus' reflection of the Father will remove the stench of bad examples of love. That makes sense? Jesus' reflection of the Father will remove the stench of bad examples of love. Now, I wish you could say, most of us love well. True? Wait a minute. This is Hope Community, JC's teaching. True? No, that still ain't going to get it. That ain't going to get it. True? No. All right, there we go. I had a dude the other day, he screamed at me. I don't know how in love I was with that last week. The dude said, preach it. I'm like, yeah, I'm at home at a black church, and I looked up. No, not really. Not really. Not really. I got carried away. So here's what I want to do. Let's do a little math this morning. Let's do a little addition and subtraction. And what I want you to do is we talked about love and patience. I'm going to give you a picture of that. I got any grandpas in the room? Stand up if you're a grandpa, please. Stand up, just real quick. Stand up. We got some young grandpas and some old grandpas, okay? Yeah, and I'm a half a step away, so we all right. Now, wait. Stand up again. I want everybody to look at these men, okay? Because these grandpas, because I want you to pay attention to them. Now, sit down, grandpas. Here's what I want you to think about. Every grandpa that got up, unless he was a little bit on the young side, had a few wrinkles, right? Now, grandpa, stand up just so we get the reminder of them wrinkles real quick. There we go. Proudly, okay? But here's what I want you to think about. When you look at these grandpa's wrinkles, I want you to think about the long suffering and patience of the Father. Each wrinkle on the eyes, the forehead, the chin, the neck, all represent the picture of the Father's capacity to love long term. Each wrinkle comes from some knucklehead acting goofy, and the Father had to say, oh, here we go. But I want you to get that picture. Each grandpa in this room has some wrinkles, and it isn't because he's God. But God has, I want to picture God anyway, personify God as a man, older man with wrinkles. And the wrinkles represent the Father's love. His love, long suffering, and patience that he has for us. Now, I want to do some addition, add to that picture of love. The men who I said grandpas, they stood up, and as soon as you seen them, they smiling. Because grandpas got the job. They don't have to kick nobody in the butt no more. They just put kids on their lap and tickle them and give them candy on the sly and that kind of thing. Grandpas are kind and compassionate. Now, if you grew up in my house, my grandpa, who I didn't know very long, had an eyebrow that went up. Okay? Now, I don't know how grandpas, now my father-in-law, Vernon, and some of you know Vernon, right? Some of you know Vernon. He's the white cat with the baseball mitts for hands, right? Because he milked cows, his thumb is as big as my head, right? Because that's just, he's trying. And just to think, when me and Lori got engaged, he came to my house and said, I don't know what I'm going to do if you continue to date my daughter. I looked at his hands and said, please, God, please. Please, I know you telling me I'm supposed to stay with her, but if he hits me with the baseball gloves, it's over, dude. It's over, right? But I want you to picture the twinkle in their eye. I want you to tag that with what Paul calls kindness. I want you to tag that with a father's compassion, a father's consideration, a grandpa's consideration for his grandkid. Because that's what Jesus reflected to us. God is kind and God is patient. A little addition and subtraction. But what we've been talking about are thorns. We talked about the addition which I'm not calling thorns. But we're going to spend we've spent 3 weeks now talking about thorns, and when we get done, we're going to talk about 8 of them. We talked about the first 3. Mike talked about envy, and then I reviewed envy. And then last week, you and I sat down and discussed boasting and pride as thorns. And when I say thorns, I want you to remove that picture. Remove those thorns from the picture of the Father. Remove them. God is not envious. God does not boast. He is not proud. Another word for proud is arrogant. Again, remember, now Paul is contrasting New Covenant God and New Covenant love, who's always been there. You look in the Old Covenant, it's there. Not as prominent or not clouded by some Old Covenant destructiveness, some Old Covenant other things. Some people would say, you're a Jew? You're telling me God's not arrogant? He told me there's only one name. Then they conquered our people. They killed everybody. Men, women, and children. What are you telling me? And Paul's saying God is doing a new thing. See, when Jesus came, they was expecting another conquering king. That Christmas when he came, when the Magi came, they wanted to anoint the new king who was going to overthrow the system in a military sense. And Jesus said, no, I'm not doing it that way right now. I'm going to overthrow the system in a love sense. I'm going to overthrow the system. I'm going to undercut the system by using God's grace. I'm going to undercut law. Complete the lawful. I'm going to complete the old covenant with new medicine. And new medicine we're going to call grace. And the message we're going to call gospel. Now, I want to say this, and I said this earlier. You know, some of us might say, well, the God that I'm describing, Mike's been describing, and Paul describes, you know, the only reason people have a bad example of that is because we got it wrong. And I'm saying if you haven't read the Old Testament, if you've read the Old Testament, you couldn't say that. I came up with 15 descriptions. You just listen. I'm looking at the stuff, and I'm not an Old Testament scholar, and I don't even know the Old Testament as well as I know the New. I've read through it a couple of times now, just so I can get a grasp for it. And I would tell you these words represent love in the Old Covenant, in the Old Testament. Rigid, proud, destructive, arrogant, presumptuous, brass, show off, competitive, murdering, punishing, banishing, distancing, mysterious, enslaver. See, Paul's saying, if that's the image you have in your crawl, that's not the Father that was reflected in me that day when I got blinded by Jesus. And when Jesus said, why do you persecute me? The man I saw in that vision was not that guy. The man I saw in that vision said, why do you persecute me after I'd killed his kids? And he looked like love. He looked patient. He looked kind. The new covenant completes the old. The new covenant gives us a new personal reflection of the Father. So let me read before we do some more subtraction from God's perspective. And let's look at two thorns. But let me read the passage in total, and then I'm going to read all the way through 8, and then we're going to just look at verse 5. Love is patient, love is kind, love does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Love never fails. We're going to look at verse 5. It is not rude, and it is not self-seeking. I found a poem by a woman named Annie Johnson Flint, and the title of the poem is called What God Hath Promised. Let me read it to you. God hath not promised skies always blue, flowers strewn in pathways, and our lives through. God hath not promised sun without rain, joy without sorrow, peace without pain. God hath promised strength for the day, rest for labor, light for the way, grace for the trials, help from above, unfailing sympathy, undying love. I thought, wow. I was thinking, my man Joel couldn't even write something so sweet. Nice. So today, let's consider that God hath promised not to behave rudely, and God hath promised not to be self-seeking. Now, if you're looking at this picture and you laugh and you see something, let's look at the meaning of the word rude. And in the Greek, the word rude seems to indicate unprofessional, unskilled, uneducated, unlearned. It seems to be directed at the regular person, and it seems to be a person without attachment, now look at that picture, to common sense. Now, in that notion of common sense, it also implies a lack of attachment to cultural rules, norms, regulations. More importantly, the word would be etiquette. So a rude person sometimes is intentionally rude, but often unintentionally rude because they're disconnected. They're not in the know. They're not in the know. They're not aware of the customs that go along. My wife, when she was in graduate school, had to write a paper. And it was she was taking a sociology class, and she was studying this process called ethnography. And what ethnographers do is they go to cultures, like somebody might come to Hope Church, and they want to do an ethnographic study of Hope Church. Well, what they'd have to do is find out what our customs, mores, codes, rules, regulations are. And in order to do that, they'd have to get some informants. They'd have to get some people who'd be willing to translate for them. This is what we're doing right now. JC's preaching right now. We're supposed to, when he preaches, we're supposed to say amen and and talk back to him. When Mike preaches, we leave him alone. Right? All right. Okay. My wife did an ethnographic study she called The Lives of the Gym Dwellers. And so what she did was she came to the basketball courts And she had me and another cat be her informants on what happens in the gym when you're playing basketball with old cats with gray hair and short shorts and all that kind of goofy stuff. Right? Hey, wait, don't laugh, though. Wait, don't laugh, though. See? There was a time before Jordan shorts or before, culottes or whatever y'all wearing now, way down here to your ankles. There was a time before that when we really wore shorts back in the basketball court. Like, you actually see some leg and stuff. You know what I'm saying? And so, and we had tube socks that had stripes on them, right? And our shoes weighed about 10 pounds, right? And believe it, I wore those shoes when I had a 38-inch vertical. They did slow me down a little bit, right? So the word there implies that. It implies a lack of connection, but also it implies an insensitivity, a lack of understanding about what's going on, a lack of wisdom, a lack of insight. Rudeness. Another word translated rude in other passages is the root word that we have. That's where I got this picture. I typed in Google, idiot. And this is what I got. Now, does anybody understand why they gave me this picture? Because if you don't get it, I can point it out for you. Idiot. Right? Right? But here's my question. Have anybody in this room, I ain't going to even look, have anybody in this room ever behaved in a rude, idiotic manner? Don't raise your hand. Because everybody has, right? Everybody has. Everybody's done something and went, whether it was trip and then jump up to see if anybody's seen you, or say something, your wife elbows you really nice and sharp in the ribs because you called that lady the wrong name or something like that. You know what I'm talking about, don't you, Randy? You know what I'm talking about? I'm with you, man. I'm with you. I feel the love. Because I'm horrible with names, so I'm like, Lord, what's her name again? Jay. Like, this is the 6th time now. I'm like, I'm an idiot. Right? So Paul is saying and making a promise to you that God's saying, now what I want you to hear is God saying the opposite of that. I won't be rude. Instead, I will be understanding and I will use practical wisdom and insight when I deal with you on a practical level, day to day. See, I do a process called LSCI, Life Space Crisis Intervention. I get to go all over the planet teaching that. I've been to Australia, all over Canada, all over the United States teaching. And what it is it's a training that we do to help people who work with troubled kids manage those kids in a more loving, considerate, caring way. And we teach the people who are trained to deal with 6 typical kinds of kids. The kid I want to talk about is what we call a new tools kid. A new tools kid is a little guy or a little gal who has the right intention but no attachment to social skills. Okay? No, they want to do well in school, but they don't know how to make a friend. They want to do well in school, but they don't have boundaries. They want to do well in school, but they don't know when or not when to raise their hand. They want to do well in school, but they can't stop talking. Okay. David is an example of a new tools kid. He's at a brand new school. He's 7th grade. He sees his friend Joe at the locker, and he thinks in his head, I want to say hi to Joe. Joe's at his locker, opening his locker. David decides to walk by Joe and just tap him in the head and say, hi, Joe. He didn't realize he tapped him hard enough that Joe's head hit the corner of the open door. Joe turns around and slugs David in the face. David doesn't understand what's going on because he was just trying to say hi and make a friend. So he's back, he's confused, and Joe's serious. Then he thinks to himself, David does, in another instance of idiocy, this is funny. So he laughs at Joe. Now Joe's furious. Joe comes after him. The teachers break it up. they take David to the principal. Here's David's opening line. What am I doing here? You should have Joe here. He's the one that kicked me. What happened? Well, I was just trying to say hi. The teacher said, well, what happened? Well, I was walking down the hall and I said hi. She said, well, how'd you say hi? Well, I kind of tapped him. See, he kind of knows something went wrong, but he don't know what it is. And then he tries to hit Joe back, but you know how them dudes do. So it's a nerd versus a jock, and so the jock tags him, knocks him around, then he hits him on the way out. And I got him, though. He didn't do anything, right? David, okay? That's a picture of rude, a picture of inappropriate behavior, insensitivity, but only because I'm on the outside. The Father, on the other hand, is on the inside and understands. And understands. So what I want to ask you to do is remove the word rude from the Father and instead use this definition, understanding with wisdom and insight. So God's not rude, but he is understanding, and he's wise enough to know customs and mores and what's going on, and practical enough to use insight that's appropriate to the moment. See, the days of walking in communities and being disrespectful and blah, blah, blah in the name of Christianity are done. Are done. Now, I will say there's an exception. Sometimes rude becomes necessary. Anybody know what this picture is? It's Jesus in the temple. And sometimes when the sheep are being slaughtered, somebody's got to stand up. Will it be you? Can you set aside courteous etiquette to say a firm word to somebody who's out of line? Speak for someone else. Because sometimes that understanding with wisdom and insight requires you to breach etiquette. Tell you a story. Is there a picture of a whip right there? Old guy once, old African-American guy gave me a whip, told me an ugly story. He went down to Mississippi to see a friend. He witnessed something. The cops stepped to him, said, "What'd you see?" He was smart enough to know. He said, "I didn't see anything." The cops said, "Are you sure you didn't see anything? Come with us." So he's smart enough to know he's in Mississippi. You better come with them. So he does. There were two cops. The one cop says to him, "Boy, you people in the North think that things have changed. They haven't. We still do things the way we have always done things." The second cop comes from outside the back seat of a car, reaches in the back seat of his car, comes out, and he's snapping a whip. He said, "People still disappear down here." So this old cat said he got the clue. And they said it'd be smart for you to go back up north, and he happened to be from South Dakota. And if you go up north right away, we won't hurt you, or we won't hurt the people you came to see. So it was back in the day. I'm not going to tell you how far back, but back a little bit, and he got on a bus and drove back up to South Dakota. When he got home, he dragged his luggage to his house, and when he opened his luggage, unzipped his zippy bag, and peeled back the cover of his luggage, guess what was in a clear plastic sack on top of all his clothes? Anybody got an idea? It was that whip, the same whip, was on top of it, just to send a message. Now, I would like to tell you that the story happened in 1955 or 1965, but I'm here to tell you that story happened in 2010. See, Christianity calls you sometimes to breach etiquette, sometimes to not do what is normal, sometimes not to do what seems to be common sense among the folks. Sometimes God's going to call you to stand up. You might have to turn some tables over, or you might have to give somebody back their whip. And that is the challenge. The second word, the second thorn that I want to remove is self-seeking, as described by Paul. Self-seeking is this notion of me first. Not your will, but my will be done. Not your agenda, not your talents, not us, not we playing in this band, but I need you to hear how good I am on the percussive instrument. Not Randy's agenda, but my agenda gets pushed. We're on the same team. Self-seeking is the picture. And Paul's saying that is not what the Father does. The Father is too great and too good to have to push his agenda. When Jesus came and he was accused wrongly of pushing his agenda, he corrected folks and said, I'm not pushing my agenda. I'm pushing my Father's agenda. My Father's agenda is love. That's it. I want you to understand that the Father loves you. Whether you're a grandpa or a grandma, an auntie or a mom, or a son or a daughter going to college or going to high school. The Father's agenda is to love and to restore the relationship that he has with his creation. That relationship has been broken because of the ugly word we rarely mention, sin. And sin is this notion of not understanding the Father loves us, which leads to all kinds of disobedience and crazy behavior. If I don't understand God loves me, I think I'm alone. And if I think I'm alone, I do all kinds of crazy stuff. Even when I start to understand God loves me, I still sometimes think I'm alone. And that's the tension. And the Father understands the push and pull. Now, my best example, when I'm looking for illustration, my best example of self-will run riot is the show Survivor. How many of y'all know that show? Raise your hand if you know that show. I'm going to mess with you a little bit. Now, y'all know y'all Christians shouldn't be watching that show. Y'all shouldn't really even be watching TV if you're real Christians, right? Nah, I'm just messing with you. Don't say JC said that. But how many watch Survivor, have watched it? Raise your hand. So you know how it works, right? I get on the show, I'm a good Christian dude, then I cut some throats in the name of $1 million. Okay? Now, the dude I hated the most when I did watch it a little bit was Richard. Yeah, so y'all know Richard. Richard was a dog, man. Richard was dirty. But reason Richard played the game so well and won twice, I think didn't he win twice? The reason he played so well is because he knew how to take your desires and use them for his outcome. He knew how to smile at the right person, get mad at the other person, and get somebody kicked off. So he was the last man standing. He knew how to end in the right show, paired up to the right person so that they couldn't win. So he'd drag some fool along who thought they might win because they was a good person, and then the credit is given to who plays the game well, not who was a good person. So when you get to that last show, if you was good but didn't play the game well and you knew Richard drug you along, you done, dude. Cut your throat. We see you. We getting Richard the money. Okay? God's saying, I'm not that dude. I'm not Richard. I'm not asking you to come into the kingdom to do my bidding. I'm not asking you to come into the kingdom to be a slave again. I'm asking you to come into the kingdom to receive liberty, to have the shackles taken off, to have your handcuffs released. Not self-seeking. The Father's love is not self-seeking. But don't get it twisted. That doesn't mean that the Father's love denies self and denies needs. And that sometimes that because we're Christian, we don't stand up to things. See, it says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Interesting, right? So if the capacity that I have to love Mary Beth is dependent on my capacity to understand I'm loved. Did you hear what I'm saying? Y'all looking at me funny, like my ability to love my man Earl is dependent on my understanding that I'm loved by the Father. If I don't understand that the Father loves me, I don't know what I'm giving Earl. It ain't love. It ain't love. It's some form of manipulation. I'm going to try to get him to serve my needs. But if I understand the Father loves me, I can freely give what's been given to me freely. Does that make sense? Amen? Okay. But I also have to understand, God not only did he love me, he loves me with my needs. To be loved and touched and cared for and all those things. Those aren't things that I'm denying that for Jesus. No. And sometimes that non-self-seeking, sometimes you got to stand up. Sometimes you got to say, hey, I need this from you. Or I need this from you. Or I feel this. I'm in the business of helping people learn how to navigate that tension. How do I love the Lord and say to my Father, you can't talk to me that way anymore? Isn't that not being a Christian? Ain't I supposed to take that? No. But you don't have to be just as abusive as he is. Paul says, use love to confound the fool. So there's a way to talk to dad that's firm, but not disrespectful, not dishonoring, right? Not self-seeking. So I want you to think about God's doing a new thing through Christ. And he promises not to be rude, and he promises not to be self-seeking. He promises to love, and his love is understanding, tempered by wisdom and insight. His love is putting our agenda first and understanding that we have an agenda. He understands that and appreciates our agenda, appreciates the fact that we're in a push-pull until the other side of the grave. On this side of the grave, we're in a push-pull. Part of us wants to do his will. Part of us wants to love. Part of us wants to hate. Part of us wants to give. Part of us wants to keep. And understand that the Father looks down and he understands that and he smiles at that. If you got tension and you're saying, boy, I got to deny myself. I got to quit being a bad guy. I got to quit being so selfish. No, you know what I'm saying to you? Own your selfishness and let's deal with it. Don't try to swallow it. Don't try to submerge it. Don't try to put it away. God's not saying, oh, I can't see part of that. It looks bad. I can't see it. He ain't doing that. He looks at you and sees everything. I want to finish today with a quote, and then we'll get ready for communion. I'll finish today with the paragraph. Written by J.I. Packer in a book called Knowing God. This is what he says. What matters supremely, therefore, is not, in the last analysis, the fact that I know God, but the larger fact which underlies it is that he knows me. I'm graven in the palms of his hands. I'm never out of his mind. All my knowledge of him depends on his sustained initiative in knowing me. I know him because he first knew me and continues to know me. He knows me as a friend, one who loves me, and there's no moment when his eye is off me or his attention distracted from me, and no moment, therefore, when his care falters. This is momentous knowledge. There is unspeakable comfort in knowing that God is constantly taking knowledge of me in love and watching over me for my good. There's tremendous relief in knowing that his love is utterly realistic, based at every point on prior knowledge of the worst of me, so that no discovery can now disillusion him about me. In no way, in the way that I am so often disillusioned about myself, and quench his determination to bless me. That's the Father's love. He's not rude. He's not self-seeking. Now, I want you to think about that. I want you to think about the grandpa with the wrinkles who's patient and has wrinkles of long suffering and a twinkle of kindness, compassion, and consideration. I want you to bring all of you to the table and partake of the wine and the bread in remembrance of this season, in remembrance of what Jesus did on that last day, in remembrance of the table represents communion with the Father.